Moonjumper here with another sub-episode of Who Cares What I Think. This one built around an extended excerpt from my latest full 1-hour episode, number 28, the Star Trek Multiverse, Musicals, and Other Random Musings, all linked down below. But the beauty of a focused sub-episode versus a full comprehensive episode is that this is focused on a single key topic. In this case, the controversial Subspace Rhapsody, a Season 2 Broadway-style musical episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, echoing similar presentations in previous TV franchises such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Flash and Supergirl, Psych, and Disney's Once Upon a Time, challenging the generally grounded hard science fiction nature of the Star Trek universe. Star Trek fans are divided between those who love the music and artistry of some rather impressive musical performances that shouldn't be dismissed, and the equally valid concerns of traditional Trekkies that believe in a universe ruled by scientific principles and logic, which doesn't typically include the Enterprise crew just randomly bursting into song and unrehearsed yet flawless professional choreography without some logical explanation to account for it. I, as a lifelong old-school original series Trekkie, who also happens to be a professional musician and equally lifelong fan of classic Hollywood musicals, find myself split right down the middle, trying to reconcile this for myself. In my opinion, Subspace Rhapsody is quite good as a musical and absolutely terrible as an episode of Star Trek. So what do? Well, what if I, your friendly neighborhood Moonjumper, fixed it for you? A hypothetical rewrite that would allow this musical Star Trek anomaly to fit smoothly into pre-existing canon? Roll the tape. And then, you do a musical. Now, full disclosure, I love musicals. I majored in music. I write music. I even occasionally get paid to sing. And I have shelves full of classic Hollywood musicals on DVD and Blu-ray going all the way back to 1929, and I've watched every single one. Some of my favorite Star Trek episodes ever made were featuring Vic Fontaine in Deep Space Nine. There is room for song and dance in Star Trek. So, unlike some, I'm not inherently opposed to a musical episode of Star Trek. Indeed, as a musical, I thought Subspace Rhapsody was rather well done. The music was good, the singing was good choreography. There's a lot of talent among that cast. In fact, I want to give a shout out to Christina Chong, who delivers a particularly standout, very powerful solo performance that gave me goosebumps. In fact, in one of her interviews, because of her stage background, she was indicating that she was personally pushing the idea of doing a musical to the producers. And if I were the showrunner and had that kind of talent available to me, I'd be tempted to do something similar. But it has to make sense to that universe. In a Gene Kelly movie, we're not shocked when people randomly burst into song and start tap dancing. We expect it. It's a characteristic of that fictional universe. But in Star Trek,
there's a mile wide emptiness between you and me.
there has bin song and dance in Star Trek from its very beginning, although generally in the context of an actual performance, or in some cases, occasionally coercion. Star Trek is supposed to be grounded, realistic, at least in tone, based on actual scientific principles, at least to a degree. Warp drives, not mushroom drives. In the Star Trek universe, people don't just randomly burst into song and dance just going down the hall without a damn good reason that makes sense within that universe. So, question. Could such a musical be done credibly in Star Trek? Absolutely. Easy. If it was being written by people who actually understand Star Trek, and they don't. In Subspace Rhapsody, The reason that the characters are irrepressibly bursting into song and perfectly choreographed dance routines to music that's not in their heads but full instrumental arrangements heard audibly through the corridors. What could possibly explain this? It's said to be caused by a naturally occurring subspace anomaly within a nebula. Yes, naturally occurring.
Fuck.
See, the writing of Kurtzman Trek is just so... I'm sorry, it's just so stupid and completely divorced from any logic or lore established in the Star Trek universe for the last almost 60 years, primarily because they've never watched it. Now let me caveat that, because there are obviously some notable exceptions. When I say Kurtzman Trek, I don't mean Lower Decks. Mike McMahon was the showrunner of Lower Decks. That was Mike McMahon's baby, and he clearly knows and loves Trek canon, even though he's also spoofing it. But it's out of love. I don't think Kurtzman had anything to do with that show other than it was under the umbrella of Kurtzman's company, Secret Hideout, for strictly legal reasons. I don't sense he had much to do with Prodigy, which kind of has its own quirks continuity-wise, which I've discussed before, but the Hageman brothers at least show some reverence to the source material, and there is a certain logic to the writing. No, when I say Kurtzman Trek, I'm talking specifically about the shows that Alex Kurtzman has had as his personal babies that are completely bonkers. I'm generally talking about Discovery and its direct spin-offs. I call it the Discoveryverse, Discoverse. That would be Discovery, Section 31, oh gosh, more on that later.
You're a bad bitch.
And also Strange New Worlds, even though that's more directly associated with Akiva Goldsman, who is only slightly more appreciative of the classic Trek look and feel than Kurtzman is, but the writing is just as illogical and out of continuity as anything in Kurtzman's Discovery. So, to be fair, if there's fault to be found regarding the SNW musical, that fault may be more directly associated with Goldsman than Kurtzman, but this is Kurtzman's universe and the writing team that he has hired and put in charge, including Goldsman. And the people in charge aren't writing science fiction, they're writing pure fantasy while trying to make it sound scientific with unconvincing technobabble. You can't make a magic mushroom drive scientific. But people who are actually versed in the lore know that not everything in Star Trek has to be scientific. I'm not a hard science fiction purist. There are plenty of fantasy elements in classic Trek that don't require any technobabble. We just accept them as part of that established universe. Ergo, how do you scientifically explain the Enterprise crew going full Broadway? Easy. You don't try to make it scientific because you just look like fools. If only these modern writers would ever just think it through even a little bit. Don't technobabble something that can't be technobabbled. There is no pseudoscientific drivel you can give with a straight face to explain how a naturally occurring nebulous anomaly, subspace or not, a subspace rift, can somehow create a professionally composed orchestral score that compels people to instantly sing well-crafted lyrics while dancing perfect professional choreography unrehearsed. That cannot happen naturally. The only possible explanation would be something that on the surface is, maybe not so scientific, but well within the context of this fictional universe. There had to have been some form of intelligence at work for this to credibly occur in Star Trek. Maybe this so-called nebula is alive. Or, we already know that there are gods in the Star Trek universe, or at least aliens who seem very much like gods. You might say, that's not very scientific. Well, no, but it's established. It would make perfect sense in that universe if, say, a Trelane or a Q had simply snapped his fingers and everybody starts bursting into song. There's precedence for that kind of silliness. Now, I would probably make up a different godlike alien rather than using Trelane or a Q, just for continuity reasons. oh, look, Trelane is going to be in Strange New Worlds this season. Because of course he is! Who needs continuity?
Fuck.
Okay, but regardless, all they had to indicate was that this otherwise quite enjoyable musical episode, I did enjoy it, was the result of an alien intelligence that would make sense for Star Trek. Okay, just to make sure I'm being fair in my little essay here, last night I decided to re-watch Subspace Rhapsody to see whether or not I might have missed something or misunderstood something regarding the basic premise, because I was admittedly distracted by the rather wonderful performances from a very talented cast with musical theater backgrounds in their resumes. I mean, my gosh, you got Celia Rose Gooding, who won a Grammy and had been nominated for a Tony Award for Best Actress, so yeah, I don't at all begrudge the showrunners for wanting to utilize that talent and do a Star Trek musical. I'd do it.
I'm ready.
But there has to be an in-universe reason that this can happen, and this is where it falters. Upon rewatching, I realized that they were trying to go outside the universe for a very convoluted explanation. In fact, it was even more convoluted than I remembered. Basically, the idea is that they discover this naturally occurring, they said naturally occurring, fold in subspace. And they're excited because maybe it could be tapped into to improve their subspace radio communications. Uhura wants to see what happens when she uploads some music into it, and that doesn't even make sense unless she's expecting someone on the other end of this to hear it and then respond, but that doesn't seem to be part of the equation, because that might be logical. No, instead, the music itself somehow causes the anomaly to burp out a burst of contagious song and dance, I guess basically from a parallel universe in which fictional Golden Age Hollywood musicals are real.
In order to function, the galactic creation point must extend through space, time, into another dimension where the logic of things is totally different.
Okay. Yes, multiverse is a thing in Star Trek, so if you want to play with the idea that maybe there's a parallel universe in which musicals are real, I mean, it's silly, but okay, fair enough. But the techno drivel is so convoluted trying to explain it and justify it, nobody knows what you're talking about. Especially watching it cold for the first time, the viewer is just left befuddled. What the hell am I watching? It's too complicated. And on top of that, it's instantly contagious to the entire Federation and Klingon Empire and anyone else who just happens to pick up the phone, which is ridiculous, especially if this is supposed to be naturally occurring. You're trying to sound intellectual and oh so scientific, and you just sound stupid. The setup for this episode could have been so simple and everyone would get it. All you had to do was say that there was an alien intelligence involved. Okay, let's say that Uhura does upload the music and an alien intelligence on the other end poofs back a reply causing all this to happen because, they think this is how we communicate. Or maybe it's just one of the many Star Trek gods that thought it was hilarious. But maybe you're thinking, the god trope is overused. Fine. It doesn't need to be a Q or a Trelane or some other godlike trickster. Just say that the nebula or anomaly itself is a life form that is trying to reach out to the Enterprise crew telepathically, and it somehow perceives that this is how we communicate because, I don't know, the crew was watching a musical when it all started, or any number of very simple premises that would work within the context of this universe. And with that tiniest simple fix, don't change anything else, keep the same music, same choreography, and the same interpersonal conflicts that the songs are about. And I think you would have had an episode that was an instant classic that could have stood alongside the greatest episodes of the 60-year franchise. And yeah, I think it'll still be memorable, but not necessarily in the best way. And I hope I'm wrong about that because it deserves to be a standout episode, surely for the amount of talent and work that went into producing this. And yet all of that is put into jeopardy because of such a convoluted premise. because these modern Trek writers don't know Trek, they don't try to know Trek, and so the result is they just piss everybody off. Let's tell it like it is. Alex Kurtzman and his cohorts have destroyed any sense of in-universe continuity or consistency in the so-called prime timeline. I thought they might try to fix it with Strange New Worlds, but they're not. If anything, they're making it worse. There is no way that Discovery or Strange New Worlds can credibly align with the original series or TNG or DS9 or Voyager, unless it's not meant to. That brings me to the big controversy. Is Kurtzman Trek set in a separate timeline from the original series and the rest of classic Trek? Oh boy, here we go. And stop the tape. My full breakdown and analysis of the Star Trek multiverse is what you will find in my latest full 1-hour episode of Who Cares What I Think. Link down below and at the end of this video. Meanwhile, let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on the Star Trek musical Subspace Rhapsody? I'd love to know what you think, but just as always, please keep it polite and family friendly, while you also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. From deep in the heart of Texas, I am Moonjumper. See you next time.
Who cares what I think?